TV yìí mo fẹ́ máa wò, ọ̀rọ̀ tó jẹ tí ń gbèsè mo fẹ́ gbọ́, ètò lóríṣiríṣi wọ́n wà lọ́lọ́kan òjọ̀kan, ìròyìn tó kojú òṣùwọ̀n àtàwọn ọ̀rọ̀ àgbọ́ fi kọ́gbọ́n, eré wọlé fún tẹ̀rù tọmọ tèwe tàgbà ẹ má fi para. Ètò TV mo fẹ́ máa wò, ọ̀rọ̀ tó jẹ tí ń gbèsè mo fẹ́ gbọ́, ètò lóríṣiríṣi wọ́n wà lọ́lọ́kan òjọ̀kan, ìròyìn tó kojú òṣùwọ̀n àtàwọn ọ̀rọ̀ àgbọ́ fi kọ́gbọ́n, eré wọlé fún tẹ̀rù tọmọ tèwe tàgbà ẹ má fi para. Àjànàkú kọjá mórí nǹkan fèrè, bàbá rere káwí parí. BGI TV, we are the pace setters. Bàbá gbàgede ìmọ̀ tẹlifíṣọ̀n station tí dòde.
Mo kí gbogbo ojú tó wò mí káàkiri ayé, mo kí wa lọ́kùnrin lóbìnrin, lọ́mọdé lágbà lónílé lálejò nínú ilé yìí. Mo kí wa wípé a kú dédé àsìkò yìí o, àsìkò bójú ọjọ́ ṣe rí. Gbogbo ẹ̀yin olólùfẹ́ wa pátápátá káàkiri ayé, mo bá wa dúpẹ́, mo bá wa yọ̀ pé ojú wa tó rójú nínú 2024. Gbogbo ohun tó ti ṣẹlẹ̀ 2023 ìyẹn ti lọ, ó ti lọ sí akínlọ. 2024 la tún bẹ̀rẹ̀ lónìí pẹ̀lú orúkọ Ọlọ́run ọba Elédùmarè, ìyẹn àfihàn akínbọ̀. Mo wá fàsìkò yìí bí Ọlọ́run pé gbogbo ojú tó ń wò mí káàkiri ayé yìí nínú 2024 yìí ẹ ní gba lẹ́tà àbànújẹ́ o, ní agbára Ọlọ́run. Wọn ò ní fi lẹ́tà àbànújẹ́, wọn ò ní fi ránṣẹ́ sí yín. Ìwé ayọ̀, ìròyìn ayọ̀ lẹ́ẹ̀ máa fi ọdún yìí gbà lágbára Ọlọ́run. Ẹ wá gbọ́, gbogbo ń tẹ́ ti dè ní 2023 tó ń tú tẹ́yìn fẹ́ kó dè ní wákàtí ọ̀wọ̀ ìyọ̀run ti gbọ́, Ọlọ́run ó máa dè lẹ́sẹ̀kẹsẹ̀ báyìí ni. Ohun tẹ́ wá ti tú ní 2023 kódà gbogbo nǹkan lẹ fi sí pé kó lè tú, ó kọ̀ kò tú o, ó túbọ̀ lé sí ni. Mo wá pe Ọlọ́run, mo bẹ̀ Ọlọ́run lásìkò yìí pé 2024 ta wọnú rẹ̀ yìí nǹkan náà bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní dè yóò máa tura látòní lọ lágbára Ọlọ́run. Gbogbo ojú tó ń wò mí, ìfẹ́ BGI TV lẹ́ní, ìfẹ́ bàbá gbàgede ìmọ̀ lẹ́ní. 2024 ayé ò ní kọ̀dé àìmọ̀ ṣe sí yín o, ẹ ní fara gbàrú ẹ ní gbégun eléegun, ẹ ní báráyé fọwọ́ tì í. Àwọn tó ti dánú ọ̀rọ̀ yín ò ní padà tó dojúrú mọ́ lágbára Olódùmarè ọba òkè. Ọlọ́run ni ẹlẹ́dàá, òun ló dèmi àti yín, kò wá ní fi wálẹ̀ fún yàjẹ́. Gbogbo ọ̀tá tó ń pètò pèrò lé wa lórí, àwọn tí wọ́n dí gàgá tí wọ́n blọ́ọ̀kù re wa ní 2023, Ọlọ́run gbá wọn kúrò lọ́nà fún wa 2024, kárọ́ lọ́n lọ gàràgà lágbára Ọlọ́run ọba. Bí ó ti rí nìyẹn o, ó di dandan ní agbára Ọlọ́run ti ṣe nìyẹn. Ẹ káàbọ̀ sí 2024, ọdún aláyọ̀, ọdún dùnnú, ọdún tó jẹ́ pé a ò ní rí àbámọ̀, a ò ní sunkún nínú ẹ̀. Bómi jẹ́ ojú bá lè yọ lójú wa, omi jẹ́ ojú ayọ̀ ni. Oore tọ́lọ́ ń ṣe táàrò náà ni ó jẹ́ fún wa. Ẹ mọ̀ pé àwọn oore míì wà tí ó gbomi ojú lójú yàn pé èmi ló ṣe léyìí fún. Bí ó ti rí nìyẹn o, ní ti dáadáa lágbára Ọlọ́run. Ẹ wá nǹkan fìdílé tàbí kẹ́ fìdílé nǹkan, kẹ́ jẹ́ kí a jọ gbádùn ètò àkọ́kọ́ nínú 2024 látẹnu èmi bàbá gbàgede ìmọ̀ Aláwìyé Adébáyọ̀ Sàbúrì ọmọ bàbá tíṣà lábẹ́òkúta. Kí n wá máa tó bẹ́tò yìí lọ, ara wọn kan tí mo ti ṣẹ̀ ní 2023, bóyá nípa ọ̀rọ̀ sísọ, bóyá nípa presentation mi, bóyá nípa ìwà, bóyá nípa èsì fífún yín, àbáwọn nǹkan míì, òṣùbà mèrè, ẹ ṣàforíjì ẹ yááfì. Ẹ jẹ́ àjọ máa kọ́ ọmọ lùbọ́n 2024, kájọ máa ṣe dáadáa nìṣó. Ẹ gbọ́, gbogbo ẹ̀yin tí ẹ bá mi dá sí gbèsè ayé mi ní 2023, ara àwọn kan tí wọ́n kàn déédé sọ pé bàbá gbàgede ẹ send account yín, wọ́n fi nǹkan ránṣẹ́ síbẹ̀ láì béèrè oore náà lọ́dọ̀ Ọlọ́run máa ṣe oore kan fún yín o nínú ọdún yìí tẹ́yìn gan ò ní rò tẹ́lẹ̀ lágbára Ọlọ́run. Gbárangbárangbáran ìró ayọ̀ yóò dùn nínú ilé yín lágbára Ọlọ́run. Gbogbo ẹ̀yin tí mo wá gbé àwọn èèyàn wá pé kẹ́ bá mi ṣàánú fún ní 2023, tẹ́ ẹ wá kọwọ́ bàpò nínú iṣẹ́ àgùn yín, tẹ́ ẹ tún fún onítọ̀hún, tẹ́ ẹ tọ́lọ́hún lò yín sábàbí láti dùn wọ́n nínú, àwọn tí wọ́n bá ẹkún dórí ètò yìí ní 2023 tọ́lọ́run sì lò yín láti bá mi pa wọ́n lẹ́rìn ẹ̀rín ayọ̀ yóò gbẹnu yín àtàwọn ọmọ yín o ní 2024 yìí lágbára Ọlọ́run ẹ ní sunkún mọ́ ẹ ní sunkún mọ́ ẹ ní sunkún mọ́ ẹkún tẹ́ bá sun yóò jẹkún ayọ̀ bí ó ti rí nìyẹn bí jáì kún fàyà kún inshallah bíkúdéra ti là ẹ wá nǹkan fìdílé tàbí kẹ́ fìdílé nǹkan àwọn ọmọ Yorùbá ọmọ aládé ládé ni wá o wọn a máa kí Sunday Igboho bẹ́ẹ̀ wọn a lọ́mọ ládé nílé aládìkún àdé aládìkún òun náà ni wọ́n yá lóde ibì kan ó yá ṣé èmi a máa sọ pé lójú agbe báyìí òun náà ni aláró ti ń ṣaró lójú àlùkò olólósùn ṣe ń kó sùn lójú lékèlékè òun náà lẹ́lẹ́fun ṣe ń kẹfun lójú ọ̀tá wa báyìí làwọn ò máa ṣe dáadáa láyé wa tọ́ta wọ́n sì máa jowú tí ò ní lè lé wa bá àwọn tó bá lókun bí tá gbà Ọlọ́run ó bá wa dá wọn lóhùn idà Michael yóò gé wọn dànù iná látọ̀run yóò fi jó wọn. ó tá a fẹ́ sọ láàárọ̀ yìí ó jẹ́ nǹkan tó jẹ́ pé àwa ọmọ Yorùbá mi mọ̀ bàbá yẹn náà mo mọ̀ pé lára àwọn pòfẹ́sọ̀ tí wọ́n nífẹ̀ẹ́ ilẹ̀ Yorùbá tí wọ́n jọ mọ ọkọ Yorùbá tí wọ́n bí sílẹ̀ Yorùbá òun náà ni bàbá wa Professor Banji Akintoye ni wọ́n jẹ́. Bàbá yìí ti wà lórí ọ̀rọ̀ ìfẹ́ Yorùbá láti ages. Ṣàdédé ni mo wà lórí YouTube ni mo bá lọ kan interview kan kùgú. Nígbà náà irú wa yóò tí ì mọ bàbá Banji tàbí ká mọ̀ wọ́n kó jẹ́ pé kò tí ì sí rapport náà pàṣẹ tí ì fi bẹ́ẹ̀ mọṣẹ́ wọn nígbà tí interview yẹn ti wáyé about 2 years ago or 3 years ago ó ní wọ́n ti conduct interview yẹn ní Channels TV Akérédolú alẹ́ òun ló ṣe conduct interview yẹn ohun tí bàbá sọ nínú interview yẹn ó padà ṣẹlẹ̀ báyìí. The interview has been conducted since it was conducted during Buhari's era. Lásìkò táwọn Buhari ń sọ̀rọ̀ rúgà tán ní ká máa fi oko wálẹ̀ káwọn Fúlàní ráyè dáko sí tán ní ká fi ilé wálẹ̀ ká fi ilẹ̀ wálẹ̀ àsìkò yẹn ni wọ́n conduct interview yìí fún bàbá Banji Akintoye. Wọn ò tí dá YBN Yorùbá kíná Yorùbá leaders ní wọn ò tí dá lẹ́ngbà yẹn. Bàbá sì wà nínú Afẹ́nifẹ́re ṣùgbọ́n ẹ rí nínú tí bàbá yẹn sọ jáde lẹ́nu pé bàbá mọ ìtàn àkọ́kọ́ wọ́n mọ ìtàn Yorùbá gidi tààrà. Bàbá ní fact and figures lọ́wọ́. Bàbá yẹn kì í ṣe àsárẹ́wọ̀ bíi tàwọn kan nísìn tí wọ́n sáré wọ̀ tán tún claim leadership nílẹ̀ Yorùbá rárá o. Ẹ ti rí i pé bàbá has been grassroots man. Tá a bá pè ní Awólọ́wọ̀ incarnation mi ìfẹ́ lè jà Yorùbá. Àwọn tó bọ́ lẹ́nu bàbá yẹn as at that time tí mo rí wò nínú interview yẹn mo mọ̀ pé bàbá mọ tí wọ́n sọ bàbá yẹn mọ ìtàn. Ní ọjọ́ Saturday fídíò tí mo ṣe last bóyá Saturday or Friday fídíò kan tí mo ṣe níbí báyìí ó dà pọ̀jọ́ Saturday ni. Fídíò yẹn ó jẹ́ nǹkan tó jẹ́ pé mo sọ lára àwọn achievement Awólọ́wọ̀ táwọn Fúlàní ti bastardize. Àfi bíi pé mo wo interview bàbá yẹn torí pé that very Saturday no Sunday àárọ̀ àná ni mo rí fídíò yìí. Èyí tí mo sọ nínú lára nǹkan tí mo sọ nínú ọ̀rọ̀ yẹn ó wà nǹkan tí bàbá náà fi sọ̀rọ̀. I wouldn't be surprised. Baba is a professor of history. So àwọn yẹn mọ ìtàn tí ò yé ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ àwọn ọmọ Yorùbá. Bàbá yẹn mọ ìtàn tí ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ àwọn ọmọ Yorùbá ò gbọ́ rí. Ẹ jẹ́ já yín sí kinní kan. Ǹjẹ́ jẹ́ mọ̀ pé population Yorùbá tó wà ní Brazil ṣe believe pé ó fẹ́ half American continent population Yorùbá tó wà ní Brazil. Kódà other African countries ta sọ pé Yorùbá wà wọn ò pọ̀ tó Yorùbá tó wà ní Brazil. Bàbá yìí sọ figures yẹn jáde síta. Aburú táwọn Fúlàní ń ṣe sí wa táwọn ò tiẹ̀ tí tètè mọ̀ ń gbà yẹn táwọn bàbá yẹn ti fura tí wọ́n ti mọ̀. Bàbá sọ nínú interview tí wọ́n ṣe fún wọn yìí. And I begin to surprise that. So Baba Banji has been in this kind of agitation before káwa tiẹ̀ tó sọ pé a bẹ̀rẹ̀ anything. Bàbá ti rí ojú wọn ti là ti pẹ́ kó tó di pé nǹkan búrẹ́kẹ́ báyìí. Gbogbo tí àwọn Fúlàní yẹn tí wọ́n sì dọ̀yà ha wa ní kéékèèké lábẹ́lẹ̀ ni bàbá ti gbárù náà ti ṣerú interview yìí. Àwọn nǹkan tí bàbá yẹn dẹ̀ rèsì nínú ẹ̀ máa fẹ́ kó ní kálukú wa kẹ́ ẹ̀ tẹ́tí lẹ́kọ̀ọ́ ká gbọ́ nǹkan tí bàbá sọ nínú àwọn interview yẹn. Kí ni wọ́n sọ ń pa ẹ̀? Kí ló ṣẹlẹ̀ sílẹ̀ Yorùbá? Báwo ló ṣe jẹ́ bí tí mo sọ ọjọ́ Sátọdé wípé wọ́n cheat ilẹ̀ Yorùbá ni? Gbogbo monument ilẹ̀ Yorùbá àwọn Fúlàní dé all of a sudden wọ́n destroy ẹ̀. Ibi kan ṣoṣo tí Yorùbá ti ṣẹ̀ wọ́n ó níbi tí Yorùbá ti exact agbára wa ká ti display ẹ̀ tí wọ́n ti rí pé àṣẹ ìran kan tún wà tó lè bí ti gbogbo Nàìjíríà sí hò tí í ṣe Yorùbá race. Kódà bóyìnbó ṣe bẹ̀rù wa àwọn colonial masters bí wọ́n ṣe bẹ̀rù wa tí wọ́n fi mọ̀ọ́mọ̀ tí wọ́n fi dọ́gbọ́n pẹ́lẹ̀ Yorùbá sílẹ̀ in their colonial activities. Gbogbo ẹ̀lẹ́ máa gbọ́ lẹ́nu bàbá yìí. Ẹ wá jẹ́ kí n sọ fún wa o, fídíò kan máa jáde kílẹ̀ tó ṣú lénìí. Fídíò yẹn mo fẹ́ fi yànnàná. Wọ́n ní PRO àwọn army ó proscribe Yorùbá nation. Àwọn tí wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ nípa ẹ̀ wípé Yorùbá nation is a terrorist group. Kí lèmi rí nípa ẹ̀ mo fẹ́ sọ nípa ẹ̀. Bákan náà ni pé kí lolóyè Ìgbòho sọ nípa ẹ̀, èsì wo ló fún arákùnrin yẹn. Ẹ gbọ́ kílẹ̀ tó ṣú lénìí, ẹ kú ojú lọ́nà. Ṣùgbọ́n interview tí wọ́n ṣe fún bàbá Banji Akintoye yìí mo fẹ́ kí gbogbo wa tẹ́tí lẹ́kọ̀ọ́ ká lọ gbọ́. Àwọn ọmọ Yorùbá kan wà tó jẹ́ pé wọ́n rí nǹkan tí Yorùbá ń ṣe presently. Wọ́n rí bí ẹni pé kò necessary now. After all Fúlàní kọ́ ló wà lórí oyè. Rárá bẹ́ẹ̀ kọ́. Lóòótọ́ Yorùbá ló wà lórí oyè. Bó àsìkò tí Yorùbá lè sọ̀rọ̀ rí. Kí làwọn nǹkan tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀ sí ìran Yorùbá? Tọ́mọ Yorùbá tí ò mọ̀ tó bá tẹ́tí gbọ́ fídíò yìí ní agbára Ọlọ́run òun gbá make decision lọ́kàn rẹ̀ pé no. Èyí tí mo ṣe Sátọdé mo rí n tó bílẹ̀ tọ́pọ̀lọpọ̀ ń sọ nínú kọ́mẹ̀ntì pé bàbá Gbàgede àwọn ògbélé ìrí àwọn mọ̀ pé bọ́rọ̀ ṣe ríre àwọn tí wọn ò ríro tẹ́lẹ̀ táwọn náà wá ń sọ pé àwọn mọ̀ pé bọ́rọ̀ ṣe ríre àwọn ò tiẹ̀ gbọ́dẹ́rú bíbáì. Bàbá Banji wọ́n tún bá mi yànnàná ẹ̀ fọ́dà ni ibi tẹ́mi ò tiẹ̀ sọ dé torí pé professor of history ni wọ́n. Bàbá yẹn sọ̀tàn yẹn kọjá bẹ́ẹ̀. Yorùbá bọ̀ wọ́n ní bọ́mọdé ò bá bá tàn yóò bá rọ̀bá. Ẹ jẹ́ ká jọ lọ sí ilé bàbá Banji Akintoye ní ilé tí wọ́n ń gbé gbà yẹn Nàìjíríà kó tó di pé wọ́n move sí Benin. Ibẹ̀ ni wọ́n ti conduct interview yẹn fún wọn about 3 years ago. Ẹ jẹ́ ká lọ gbọ́ ká tẹ́tí lẹ́kọ̀ọ́ ká farabalẹ̀ o torí pé a máa rẹ́kọ̀ọ́ kan bẹ̀ gan. Kódà ẹ mú báírò àti ìwé dání pàápàá. Èmi náà rí tí mo rí jọ́ọ̀tì sílẹ̀ ń bẹ̀. Ẹ jẹ́ a jọ lọ gbọ́.
ṣètò ìwé ìrìnnà láìsí kọ́nu ńkọ́. ọ̀gá ni Fox Excellence Able Travels and Tour Limited. ṣé wọ́n ní ẹṣin tó ṣíwájú ni ló gba fe. ká ṣètò ìwé ìrìnnà lọ sílùú Mecca òun Jerusalem. ṣètò iléègbé lókè òkun. iṣẹ́ kíkọ́ kíkẹ́kọ̀ọ́ lókè òkun. pàápàá ètò fún wíwọlé sílé ẹ̀kọ́ American University Mauritius. fún diploma 2 to 4 years degree program àtàwọn ẹ̀kọ́ míì. tó o sì lè lò láti parí ẹ̀kọ́ rẹ ní USA, UK, Malta, Philippines, Italy. níbi táwọn ọgbà ilé ẹ̀kọ́ wọ̀nyí wà. Fox Excellence Able Travels and Tour Limited ló ń bá ní ṣe é nírọ̀rùn. wọ́n gba òǹtẹ̀ lọ́wọ́ ìjọba pẹ̀lú àwọn àjọ tó ń rí sí ìrìn àjò ojú òfurufú. wọ́n ti ṣe é fọkàn tán. ìgbésẹ̀ wọn yára kọ́kọ́. kàn sí wọn lónìí lólú iléeṣẹ́ wọn tó wà ní nọ́mbà 23B Shokeni Road, Òkè Ìjẹun, Abẹ́òkúta, Ògùn State. ẹ tún lè kàn sí wọn ní www.excellencetravels.com.ph tàbí kẹ́ ẹ pè wọ́n lórí àwọn ẹ̀rọ ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ wọn. Philippines +639 693 550 167. Mauritius +230 584 620 96. ẹ sì lè kàn sí wọn lórí ẹ̀rọ ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ ti Nàìjíríà +234 905 505 2472. Fox Excellence Able Travels and Tours. Àràbà ni bàbá, ẹni abálábà ni bàbá.
Welcome to Newsnight.
Thank you.
You spoke at a public lecture in commemoration of the Yoruba Kiriji War.
Yeah.
Many students of history know that that war was probably the longest in the annals of world civil wars. But it was almost exclusively within Yoruba land. Now, before I come to what you said there, the war itself, did we, as students of history, take any lesson from there in the way you're seeing us behave now?
Yeah, I was actually looking at the lessons to be drawn from our history of the war and the events that followed. The fact that after the war, we became very rapidly highly educated people with university professors. Some, by the 1880s, when the war was coming to an end, some Yoruba families were already producing their third generation of university graduates. We had started in 1859. We published our first newspaper on the African continent in Abeokuta, and very rapidly other papers followed, especially in Lagos and so on. And in the 1990s, as the British or as the Europeans were sweeping over West Africa or Africa to establish colonies, we Yoruba, and they were becoming very arrogant. The Europeans were becoming very arrogant and talking about the inferiority of the black man. They said the black man has never created any index of civilization and can never do so, and so on. But we Yoruba showed them that we could. And we started what we call the movement of Yoruba cultural nationalism, which was the only thing on the African continent challenging the arrogance of the white people, and so on. But unfortunately, we didn't carry that far enough. We could have. And if we had done that, we had the influence to prevent what later happened, our becoming a British colony, and our becoming part of a large country. We could have. We are a large nation on our own. We don't need to be part of any country.
You're referring to the Yorubas?
Yes, the Yorubas, yes. We made mistakes. We had the military power, very big military power, to resist any incursions of colonialism into our territory. We commanded a lot of influence in our educated people who could have influenced the European governments back in Europe. We commanded a lot of influence in our missionaries. One of them was the highest church official in the whole of West Africa. We had our clergy had a lot of influence. And then we had great traders in the interior, especially in Lagos and Ajashe, Porto Novo. Some of these merchants already had shipping lines of their own. And we had these powerful newspapers, though, that were the pillars of this movement of Yoruba cultural nationalism. We had all of that, and we yet let our land become British colony, or partly British colony, partly French colony, partly German colony. It's puzzling how we could command such enormous power in our hands, and yet let ourselves become the colony of any other country in the world. And we had the military power too. I have estimated that by 1992, when the first attempt was made to conquer the Ijebu Kingdom, there were in different kingdoms and authority in the hands of different authorities in Yoruba land, over 500,000 very highly seasoned soldiers, commanded by very powerful, great commanders. We didn't pull all of that together. We didn't pull our military resources together. We didn't use our influence in the media. We didn't use the influence of our educated people. We didn't use our influence in the church circles in Europe through our clergymen, and we let our country become a colony of the British, and partly the French and partly the Germans. We who are students of history, we are looking at that. What really did happen? How could the people who are so powerful and so rich and so capable simply let their country slide the way the other parts of Africa slid? That's one thing. So my question now to Yoruba people is, okay, today we are still a very large country, still the largest country, the largest people, the largest single nation in Africa, the most educated, with enormous power beyond Nigeria. In a meeting recently, I was talking and I said, we Nigerian Yorubas are about 56 million, but in this country of Brazil, we have about 54 million Brazilians. So people shut up their hands immediately and said, no, sir, you are wrong. That's old statistics. We are more than 70 million now in Brazil. So we are in Brazil, we are in Cuba, we are in all the countries, in most of the countries of the Caribbean, we are in Central America, and then that's the old diaspora that was formed in the time of the Atlantic slave trade. But the new diaspora that has been forming gradually since the time of independence in Africa in the 1960s, the ones to which I have belonged for about 25 years before returning home some 3 years ago. We are a very large and powerful nation. We have a lot of influence. But now here we are being ground to the dust, by some very negative influences and forces in Nigeria. And we don't seem to be able to put in together our collective strength in order to protect ourselves and save our people. And our people have been driven from their farms, they are being killed on their farms, their women are being raped, and their people are being kidnapped, and so on. And people are claiming, we are coming to kill, maim, destroy in your land. And they are coming, killing and maiming and destroying. And we don't seem to be able to stop it. It's a very sober picture when one looks at it. This is a great nation with a great deal of power. It should not be suffering the way it is suffering in Nigeria.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt, but going along the lines of what you're saying, I'm trying to quote or paraphrase what you said. You said the Yorubas are living like slaves. They don't seem to be able to see the fire, but the smoke is all around us.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Yeah, we're more or less like an enslaved people in this country. Most of the peoples of the Middle Belt and the South are like enslaved people in this country. We are being ruled by impunity. There is no respect for the Constitution or the law. The people who control the power of government in Abuja are doing what they like. And there is no sense of responsibility in terms of security of the people. People are being killed and so on, and the government in Abuja is not really doing much. In fact, for a long time, they were not doing anything to protect us. And they are using their power more to compel the authorities of our states to make it possible for people who say we are coming to kill and maim and destroy to enter into our land and to take territory and settle, under whatever name you may call it.
You're referring to things like the NLTP,
the
Ruga,
etc.,
cattle colonies, and so on.
It's irresponsible for the government of a country to say to people who are being brutalized by a particular set of people, to say to them, open your territory for them to come in. You can't say that.
Well, but if we go back a bit, Prof, and look at this, the issue of cattle colonies or Ruga or the National Livestock Transformation Plan, the various names that these things have been given, are supposed to be a solution to the basic problem you identified earlier, which is the one of people coming into other people's farmlands and so on and killing them and all of that. The whole issue of livestock grazing openly and all of that. This is supposed to be one of the steps to be taken to solve that.
No, the people are being brought. The people who are threatening that they're coming to kill and maim and destroy are being told that we are going to help you, in fact, settle in the lands of those people whom you are coming to kill and maim and destroy. That's not the way government solve problems. The way to solve problems will be to find an answer to the governor of Kano said, I have enough grassland in Kano State to accommodate all of the cattle grazing that is happening. Nobody is taking up that offer. But there is an insistence to inculcate the Fulani into the territories of the peoples of the Middle Belt and the South. And the federal government is pushing that might and may. So naturally, the rest of us who are not Fulani are suspicious of the intentions of the federal government.
Could this be a problem of presentation, Prof?
It's not a question of presentation. It's a question of an agenda that we are seeing behind all of that is happening. It's not just presentation.
I ask that because the Southern and Middle Belt Forum and other such groups that you mentioned are also opposed to things like the Water Resources Bill.
Yes, because it's another attempt to create an avenue for creating Fulani settlements all over our land, in the river basins and the river banks and so on in our land. It is the same thing. The federal government seems these days to be doing nothing more than to think of ways that we are going to get this Fulani to be admitted into these lands.
But there are already Fulanis in most parts of the South and Middle Belt.
Yeah, we are not opposed to Fulani, especially we Yoruba. You know who we are. We welcome foreigners in our land. Our culture says very specifically, the stranger is coming, receive him and take care of him, because your God has benefits hidden for you in that. That's our culture. And in our history, we have welcomed people. We welcome people. We don't attack strangers on our land. In fact, it's a traumatic experience for a Yoruba man to have to raise his hand up and hit a foreigner on his land. It doesn't do that. But what we are seeing is that it's no longer just cattle herders were coming to our land when I was a child, a peasant farmer's child. And we will go to the farm, we will see the cattle herder on the way, and he and his cattle, and we will play with the cattle. He will protect us. He said, don't come too near the cows because they could kick you or something. And he was not a hostile person. He was a very nice person who did his work. And if his cows were coming too near our father's farm or our uncle's farm, he would go and drive them away from the place. But now there is an agenda. Not all cattle herders, but some cattle herders come deliberately, belligerently. Their intention is to provoke conflict. Because behind them, we have now discovered, behind them, close behind them, is another group of people who are not cattle herders at all, who are armed with AK-47 rifles, who are actually well-trained militia men, and who, when the Fulani herder, who is the belligerent, not all of the, the belligerent cattle herder comes into your farm and is eating your crops, and you raise an outcry or resist or something, they are going to come. The militia men are going to come and attack your farm, your village, or anything that night or the night after, and so on. That is the pattern. It is no longer a question of cattle herders coming and rearing their cattle. It's now a question of some cattle herders coming deliberately to provoke conflict with farmers so that the armed militia men behind them will have an excuse to come and then attack and destroy that village and kill the people there.
Prof, there are those who are accusing the various ethnic groups of politicizing this thing, that no problem like this has ever been solved by any means other than by dialogue. And I raise that because at a point, the former head of state, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, called a peace meeting in Minna. And he invited all the various groups, Afenifere, the Southern and Middle Belt Forum, Ohanaeze, ACF, Northern Elders Forum, and so on. But the Southern groups that were invited said they weren't going once it became clear that one of the groups that was invited was the umbrella group of this people you describe as those entering other people's farmlands and actually raping, maiming, and killing them, that they weren't going because those people were going to be there. And there were those who asked the question, but these are the people you should actually be talking to. With benefit of hindsight, I mean, that meeting has come and gone now. With benefit of hindsight, was that an error?
No, that was not an error.
Why?
Well, I still am shocked that anybody would equate Miyetti with Afenifere or Ohanaeze or Pandeb. Oh, really? Miyetti has presented itself as a terrorist organization. Afenifere is not a terrorist organization. Ohanaeze is not a terrorist organization. Pandeb is not a terrorist organization. You shouldn't be equating an organization that has threatened, written letters of threat to governors in this land to say we are coming to kill and maim and destroy your land. I was in the Yoruba delegation to Benue State in January 2018. After a large number of people were killed in Benue State, they had gotten a letter from some section of Miyetti saying that you, Mr. Governor of Benue State, because your government made a law to regulate cattle rearing in Benue State, we are coming to wreak vengeance on the people of Benue State. On January 1, they came and they killed large numbers of people and destroyed many villages. Then on the 5th of January, leaders of the South, Southeast, Southwest, and Middle Belt went to commiserate with the Benue people. And the governor thanked us, and then he said, well, the same people who wrote the letter in December or so have written another letter now that I have received. And he then read the letter to us. The letter said, Mr. Governor, we see that you and your people are doing mass burials and carrying out national mourning, but that what is happening to you, what has happened to you, is only a little bit of what is coming to you. That we are coming, and it is going to be bigger and worse this time. And your problem is with us is that your different ethnic groups, the thieves, the this, the that, and so on, regard the land on which they have lived for thousands of years as their land. It is not their land, the letter said. The land belongs to us, Fulani, and we have now a reason to take it. And we are not talking of the peoples of Benue State alone. We are talking of all the peoples of Nigeria. We have accumulated money and weapons for a long, drawn-out war. We have invited Fulani from all the rest of West Africa to come and join us to take our land in Nigeria. And if you think your federal government can defend you, you are kidding. They cannot defend you. He read a letter to us, and we all sat down there wondering whether we were still in Nigeria. It is, you know, people who are doing that, you now equate them to Afenifere or to Ohaneze or to Pandev? Good goodness. No, I don't think. We have no business sitting with them yet, Yala.
Prof, that brings me to something else. All the groups you've mentioned are all representing various ethnic groups in the country. And there has been this continuous clamor that the country needs to be restructured, that we have to take a look at how it is governed again. And different people have come up with different ideas. Some have said we should go back to the Westminster style of government. Others have said we should go back to the 3 or 4 regions. Others have said 12 states. But basically, that we need to take a second look at it. But the paradox appears to be that there's no legal way to take a second look at it without interfacing with what is currently in place.
There is a way to do it.
How?
In 1953, India had this type of problem. After Pakistan and Bangladesh had left, the rest of India was again beginning to shake as if it was going to, because there was too much centralization of power in the government, in the hands of the government. And people began to clamor that we need to restructure our country. The big politicians of the time refused to accept that that was necessary. The Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, threatened as if the country was restructured, especially restructured on the basis of respect for nationalities, for linguistic groups, that he was going to resign, because he feared that that would lead to the dissolution of India. But by and by, he was a Democrat. By and by, he surrendered. And in 1956, they set up a commission. He set up a commission. We need to restructure this country, but we don't know how. So it has an official commission by the government of India to say, okay, we want to restructure this country, but we don't know how to do it. So it is your duty to guide us. That's what they did. And the commission then came out with his report, suggesting, one, that the linguistic nationalities should be respected in any structure of the country. Two, that they should be so well respected that no linguistic group will be split among any whatever states are created. That each linguistic group should enjoy its integrity by being kept together in one state or another, and not split up between states. Three, that the powers that have been in the federal government really don't, in a country like this, doesn't belong in the federal government. It belongs in the governments of the various states. That the nationalities that are large should become one state. Each nationality that is large be one state. The smaller ones, where they are contiguous, should be assisted and encouraged to form a small federation of their own within the Indian Federation, the Indian Union. And so on the basis of that, India gradually came up with 28 states, which is what they still have today. And a lot of the resources in education, in agriculture, in this and that, went to the states. And where for distributable federation accounts, the decision initially was that the federation would take something like 35, 40, and the states would take about 65, 70. But today, it is 15% for the union and 85% for the states. So the general direction has been that more and more of resources are going to the states, more and more powers are being delegated, and so on and so forth. It is the only way to rule a country like Nigeria. We are different peoples. We are not a nation. We are a country of nations. And the nations must be respected.
And you don't have any fear that what someone like Nehru was able to do in India at the time, because of his position, you mentioned the fact that he was a Democrat, and then he had a very huge stature in India, that we may have a different outcome here.
If Buhari starts to do it today, he will have a great stature. It's a question of responding to the demands of the moment. The demands of the moment for Nigeria, if Nigeria is to survive, is to restructure. If Buhari were to sit down to say, well, I concede that that's the direction we should go, and now we are going to go along it as seriously as possible, his stature will grow big suddenly.
But it seems as if on this issue of restructuring, Prof, the country is divided. In the South,
India was divided too.
No, what I mean is, in the South, there is a lot of support for it. But up north, they're asking questions. What does this mean?
The reason the Northerners, especially the Northwest, does not accept it is that power is in their hand. They see restructuring as a means of taking power away from them. So why should they support it? They won't support it.
But then how do we get out of it? Because in that kind of situation, if one or more of the components are not carried along in the general direction that others want to go, you still have a problem.
Yeah, we still have
because they will resist.
We still have a problem, and
that's what I meant by how do we get over that?
Yeah, we then have a problem that we need to sit down and negotiate. We need to negotiate it, frankly. It's not a matter of national conference. It's not the big noise of national conference. It's the representatives of the nationalities sitting around a mahogany table and deciding what we really want to do with Nigeria. We have reached that point.
What would you do with the National Assembly?
Oh, no, that's the institutions. I'm not talking about the institution.
No, but that's what I'm raising.
I'm talking of negotiations among the owners of the country. The owners of Nigeria are the nationalities, the nations that are in Nigeria. They are the owners of this country.
But they are represented in the National Assembly.
Yeah, they are. But the you have to raise this above the level of the institutions and create a situation in which we can negotiate together directly and not leave it to the National Assembly or even the executive government. The negotiation among the people, among the peoples who own Nigeria.
Well, you talked about it not being about the national conference, but isn't that what the national conferences have been about?
No, the national conference.
2014.
No, the national conference is created to legislate. This is not legislation. This is negotiation about the fundamental question of Nigeria itself.
Well, in that case, Prof, there are 300, going by what we now are told, there are 378 ethnic linguistic groups in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. There are big ones, and as you pointed out, there are less than big ones.
Yeah.
So even on that score alone, in terms of the sheer number, how do you take this kind of proposal through all those groups?
India has more of such nationalities than Nigeria does. India has a population that is about 5 times that of Nigeria. Nigeria is only about 200 million. India is 1-point-something billion. It has a territory that is the largest country on earth. When they put down the principles, the large nationalities will become states. the smaller contiguous nationalities will be assisted to create a federation of their own.
But would that create new major groups and new minor groups? Because that's always the fear.
No.
I'll give you an example. There are some states that were created when Nigeria was 19 states. There were some states that were created when they became 30 states. That under the 19-state structure, there were ethnic groups in some of those states that were minorities in the states. But when they became a 30-state structure, they became majorities in the new states. And then there were new minority ethnic groups that continued to cry.
Listen, those are situational mathematics.
Yes.
We are talking of the existing nationality structure that God himself put there. It is there that you deal with, not national, and no nationality be split. Even when the nationalities come together, if the smaller nationalities come together and create a little federation of their own, they must use the boundaries of local government to create, to preserve respect for the integrity of the smallest nationalities. That's the only way to get to move forward. If Nigeria were to continue to try and govern itself the way we are governing ourselves now, with all the power in the hands of the federal government, with the federal government being so powerful that it wants more power. That's what is happening. The federal government is so powerful now that its whole orientation is to seek for more and more power, more and more power. If the federal government can do it, they will abolish the land use decree so that the federal government will be the owner of all land in Nigeria. There's nothing that is too much for them to imagine, because they feel that they are in control. No, you can't. If you try to rule a country like Nigeria like that, it will break up in the end. And it is not a good thing to let this country break up. It will break up if we do not do something about this in a hurry.
Prof, another major challenge, and which may be feeding the one you are describing, is the general state of security. And it would appear as if already, even without a clear policy on that, the regional blocks, the geopolitical zones, are taking matters into their own hands and putting in place strategies or measures to protect their own regions. In the South, you have the Southwest putting in place its own measures, the Southeast doing the same, and the South-South, even the North Central, where you have the Middle Belt. Now, are you satisfied from what you see that this is now the way to go, as opposed to having a national coordinated strategy to protect the country?
The national coordinated strategy is not going to come. It's not going to come. So why do we talk about something we know will not come? What is happening now is that the state at last are beginning to establish some confidence to do something that they were timid about until recently. Until recently, it was obvious to all of us observing from outside. This is our country, so we have to pay attention to what is happening. It was obvious to us that the federal government was pressurizing the state governors to surrender, to succumb to what the direction that the federal government wanted things to go. So the governors in every state, the governor in every state then came under pressure from both sides. It's like being between the jaws of a pair of nutcrackers. The federal government is pushing them, pushing them. There are people that are telling them, if you give in, you give our land, there'll be trouble. So the governor is in the middle. It's pitiful figure. So now finally, they are beginning to learn to come together and do something. And we in the Southwest are beginning to see motion. And we are very grateful for that. And the people in the East and so on, and the Middle Belt also are beginning to see some change, more in the South than in the Middle Belt. And there is that's welcome. So we must hope that they will push it harder and harder, further and further, until we have a very solid cast iron system of protection of our lives, of the lives of our people in our region, in our zone. It's not going to be easy, but in a place like the Southwest, there are citizen groups that, if we use them well, they can do a lot of good job for us. And there are traditional institutions. For instance, we had under the British a system that was called the Forest Guard system. We should revive that and use it as a tool for protecting life in the rural areas. And we have this old system whereby when there is trouble, the Yoruba town, the Yoruba city, the authorities of the Yoruba town, the Yoruba city, we call in a certain class of men and give them instruction. And we know that those people out there in the night have very great respect for human life. They will protect the neighborhood, but we Yoruba, we are proud about that we can put such people in the streets in the night and yet have respect for human life there. So we have institutions that we can use. We have institutions that we can use. And we must pray our governors. Whatever they do, they should look at these various institutions that we can use in our zone.
Prof, you're a historian, but you're also in academics. And you've been both here and outside here. What do you think of our educational standards?
Well, we used to be very proud of our education in the 1950s, the 1960s. You're asking me a question that can make me emotional, because the educational system has virtually collapsed in Nigeria. My closest friends are the university people. My favorite places of visit are the university campuses. That's where my root is. I am unhappy. I'm very sad about what I see.
What do you see?
Disintegration, decline, poverty, loss of excellence. That's what I see everywhere, in primary schools, in secondary schools, in teacher training colleges, in universities, especially in the universities, which is where I know most. It's shocking what is happening to our universities. Listen, in 1982, as a Nigerian senator, I was invited by the government of South Korea to give a lecture in Seoul. And the topic they wanted me to speak of on is the growing relationship between South Korea and Nigeria. They were inaugurating a new president, and the day after the inauguration, I gave my lecture, but mostly to big men, politicians, and civil servants, and so on. I was bragging that day. I was bragging. I was saying, I know you people are thinking of oil. Yes, we can supply oil to you, to your growing industries. But there are things that we have achieved that we can also teach you. For instance, we have built some of the best universities in the British Commonwealth. We have built some of the medical schools in the British Commonwealth. We have the skill. We already have acquired the skill for doing those things. And we can impart that to you. I've been to Korea not long ago. And I can now tell you I'm sobered by what I see. It is sad. Human beings are very powerful. It's a great phenomenon that we Nigerians have taken the educational system of our country and within a short time have dragged it down all the way to the ground. It's wonderful. It's horrible. It's horrible. So that's what has happened to our educational system.
What can we do about it?
I wish I could answer that in a few sentences, but let me take it. We need to I wouldn't say hold a national conference on education. I would say establish a national commission charged with the duty of looking at the educational system, describing it, and identifying the sources of the weakness, of the decline, and then proposing the solutions that will lead to a change. For instance, UNESCO says for an educational system in a country to be viable, the country needs to be spending something like 25 or more of its GDP on education. There were times when Chief Awolowo, there were years when Chief Awolowo, as Premier of the Western region, spent 42% of the GDP of the Western region on education. Today, the highest we find in Nigeria is 8%. At some point, until a few years ago, it fell down to 6%. You cannot sustain education with 6% or 7% or 8%. But you cannot leave that to the budget, the people who make the budget. They make the budget on the basis of what happened last year. You are talking of a commission that can say this is wrong. You are destroying our country with this type of budgetary allocations to education. We must raise it gradually, this way, next year, until we reach the right percentage. You need a commission to do that. And when we set up such a commission, we don't make it Nigerians alone. We bring people into it from UNESCO, from other countries, and so on and so forth, who can help. I believe we can change the situation. I believe we can, if there is the will to change it, that is. If there is the will to change it, we can change it.
Now, there's cooperation between groups representing ethnic nationalities right across the South. South-South, Southwest, Southeast, Middle Belt. And from what I hear, because in the chair you're sitting in a few days ago was Chief Edwin Clark. And he was talking about the same cooperation. And I'm going to ask him a question. I'm going to ask you a question I asked him, which is that this cooperation is going on right now because there are certain strategies that these groups now have in common. But there are those who are saying the battle for political power come 2023 is likely to create some level of agitation, even within these groups. Because there are some who think we shouldn't even be talking about 2023. There are others who think, well, if we're talking about 2023, then it should be the turn of some people, not others. Do you think that's likely? That the cordiality, the friendship, the cooperation that is currently ongoing between these groups might be affected by this struggle?
I am very hopeful, might even say confident, that the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum will hold together. What confronts us is so big that an election is a little thing compared with it. In the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum, we are elders of nations that are under enormous pressure.
Chief Clark says, because I put it to him that the political calculation being done by some is that by that time, the North would have done 8 years. And that by the gentleman's agreement between some of the major political actors, it will be time for power to come back down south. And that at that point, where would it go? Because in the south, you have 3 geopolitical zones. Of those 3, 2 have had a shot at it. The southwest has, the south-south has. So logic would presume that it is the turn of the southeast. Do you buy that?
Beautiful thinking. But that's not what is going to happen. Already significant elements in the North are saying that they have the power, the federal government, and that is not, they're not going to let it go in a hurry.
And if that happens?
Sad as it may sound, they have the power to keep the presidency in the North.
In spite of this agreement that some are alluding to?
People are already saying it's a gentleman agreement. It's not a constitutional. There is no compulsory reason why it should happen. There's no compulsion about it. That we in the North, we control the federal government, we will control it. In 2023, there are already people in the North who have been groomed for the position of president after Buhari. We know what is happening. When I said that our nations have become like slaves in Nigeria, I mean it seriously. It's unlikely if what we are seeing should persist. It's unlikely that we will have the presidency coming to the South in 2023. Very unlikely. I would like to see it come. As a member of the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum, I would make all my contribution that I can. I know that we have the influence, we have the capability to do some things, but I doubt that it will all be sufficient to wrestle the presidency from the North in 2023.
I want to drill down on the issue of the restructuring that you mentioned and the strategy of how to see it done. No doubt you seem to have quite a number of the major stakeholders in the South on board. Chief Clerk told me that quite a number. No doubt you seem to have quite a number of the major stakeholders in the South on board. Chief Clerk told me that quite a number of the stakeholders from the North also come in from time to time and participate. Even when they disagree, they listen and they take some things away and all of that. Do you think that is a strategy worth pursuing to get them on board so that a bigger portion of some of these major political stakeholders can see the point in what you've talked about so passionately and can in turn convince some of their own people that this is the way to go?
Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum or the Nigerian Elders Forum, they are influential, but I doubt that their influence will really affect the ultimate outcome of things. I don't believe that the elders from the Northwest will ever be able to persuade the politicians of the Northwest that there should be some fairness in the management of the affairs of Nigeria. The Northwest has control of Nigeria, period. And that's the situation. I doubt that their elders, even when they agree that things should be softened down, will succeed in getting the people in control to soften down.
Professor Akintoye, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
BGI TV yìí mo fẹ́ máa wò, ọ̀rọ̀ tó jẹ tí ń gbèsè mo fẹ́ gbọ́, ètò lóríṣiríṣi wọ́n wà lọ́lọ́kan òjọ̀kan, ìròyìn tó kojú òṣùwọ̀n àtàwọn ọ̀rọ̀ àgbọ́ fi kọ́gbọ́n, eré wọlé fún tẹ̀rù tọmọ tèwe tàgbà ẹ má fi para. BGI TV mo fẹ́ máa wò, ọ̀rọ̀ tó jẹ tí ń gbèsè mo fẹ́ gbọ́, ètò lóríṣiríṣi wọ́n wà lọ́lọ́kan òjọ̀kan, ìròyìn tó kojú òṣùwọ̀n àtàwọn ọ̀rọ̀ àgbọ́ fi kọ́gbọ́n, eré wọlé fún tẹ̀rù tọmọ tèwe tàgbà ẹ má fi para. Àjànàkú kọjá mórí nǹkan fèrè, bàbá rere káwí parí. BGI TV, we are the pace setter. Bàbá gbàgede ìmọ̀ tẹlifíṣọ̀n station tí dòde.